Hi everyone. Welcome back to our channel where we discuss various DIY and electronics projects. In today's video, we're going to talk about soldering techniques. Whether you're an electrical engineer, hobbyist, or a DIY enthusiast, soldering is the most fundamental aspect of electronic and DIY projects. In this video, we will discuss the basics of soldering, the different tools and materials needed, and some tips and techniques to make your soldering project successful. So, if you're ready to master the art of soldering, let's get started. Step 1. Understanding the basics of soldering. Before we dive into the different soldering techniques, let's first understand the basics of soldering. So, what is soldering? Soldering is a process of joining two metal surfaces, usually copper, by using a low-temperature alloy called solder. This solder melts and flows into the joint to create a strong and permanent bond. To perform soldering, you'll need a few essential tools and materials, including a soldering iron, solder wire, flux, and a damp sponge. Make sure you have all these things ready before you start soldering. Step 2. Choosing the right soldering iron. When it comes to soldering, choosing the right soldering iron is crucial. There are two main types of soldering irons: temperature-controlled and non-temperature controlled. A temperature-controlled soldering iron lets you set and control the temperature of the iron, while a non-temperature controlled one operates at a fixed temperature. For beginners, a temperature-controlled soldering iron is recommended as it gives you more control and flexibility over the soldering process. Step 3. Soldering techniques. Now it's time to dive into the different soldering techniques. Here are some popular soldering techniques used in electronic and DIY projects. Through-hole soldering technique. Through-hole soldering is a popular technique used to solder components onto printed circuit boards, PCBs. In this technique, the components are inserted through pre-drilled holes on the PCB and soldered on the opposite side of the board. Surface mount soldering technique. Surface mount soldering is used to solder tiny components directly onto the surface of a PCB. In this technique, the solder is usually applied using a stencil and reflowed in a specialized oven. Tinning the tip. Tinning the tip of your soldering iron is essential for successful soldering. To do this, apply a small amount of solder onto the tip of your iron and wipe it away using a damp sponge. This helps to remove any dirt or impurities on the tip and enables the iron to transfer heat better. Soldering wires. Soldering wires can be a bit tricky, but with patience and practice, you can master this technique. First, strip a small section of the wire insulation. Then, apply some flux to the exposed wire and the soldering tip. Heat the wire with the iron and apply solder until the wire is fully covered. Step 4. Final tips and tricks. Here are some final tips and tricks to help you improve your soldering skills. Use a soldering helping hand or clamp to hold your components in place while soldering. Always use the appropriate solder wire for your project. There are different types of solder available, such as lead-free and lead-based solder wires. Clean your soldering tip regularly using a damp sponge or brass wool. A clean tip enables better heat transfer and prevents oxidization. Conclusion. And that's it for today's video on soldering tips and techniques. We hope you found this video helpful, and now you have a better understanding of how to solder different components and wires. Remember, practice makes perfect, so don't be afraid to try new things and experiment with different techniques. With time and practice, you'll become a soldering master in no time. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.